Okay, guys, we are going to begin. Mike and Sue, were you here on Sunday? You were not. All right, so this is the first time you're hearing this. Okay. Ed, you were not here.
We did watch.
You watched it? Okay. So we've got Paul. Did you see this? The thing. All right. So this is new for you. John, you were here, and
I was not here in person on Sunday.
okay. All right. Okay. Well, then I think the way we're going to proceed is I'm going to run through, and maybe in a somewhat of abbreviated form, the presentation which we were given on Sunday, and then we'll have a chance to to talk along the way. Let's open with a prayer, and I'll tell you how we're going to proceed. Lord God, Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity just to be able to gather today and have this discussion. We leave all things in your hands, and we ask for your blessing upon our discussion this evening, and and whatever outcome from it you desire for us as your people to have. Be with us, guide us for Jesus' sake. Amen. All right, so I'm going to run through the presentation. Step one, turn it on. What? Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry, thank you. Why a potential campus expansion? Well, the only reason we do anything we do is we are compelled by the Great Commission. At the end of Matthew, Jesus gave the church its marching orders. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And so the dual purpose of nurture and outreach, those are the marching orders for the church. And as a church, that's the sieve through which we must sift all of our programs. So we have the Great Commission, and then we also are guided by our strategic plan. If you didn't pick one of those up, they're on the desk there. I want to talk a little bit about that. And the point is that this is continuing of an ongoing process. The St. John's strategic plan was the result of some intensive self-study about 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of internal discussion, a lot of focus groups, whereas the members of St. John's said, this is the direction that we would like to see our church go in. And it has always been the approach here at St. John's that we plan the work, then we work the plan. And so our strategic plan is a grassroots document where the members of St. John's has said, under God's grace and guidance, this is where we would like our church to go. If you take a look at that strategic plan, and I want to spend just a little time on this. Who doesn't have one? Paul doesn't have one. There's some highlighted sections here. They were repeated on the following page, on the next pages as well. We had a strategic plan which was devised around 5 core values: worship, discipleship, community, service, and evangelism. If you would turn to page 2, the second page, where it begins. The first core value has to do with worship. The second one is discipleship. You'll notice the highlighted areas. First paragraph, St. John's will operate a child care, now we would call it an early learning center, and a K-3 to 8th grade Lutheran elementary school that prepare our students for a lifelong relationship with Christ. That's our stated goal. And how are we going to do this? How are we going to carry this out? Look at number 3. These would be the action items. Consider space requirements for growing our Child care program, again, think ELC, as part of our facility master plan, which is precisely what we have done. And number 6, promote our K-3 to 8th grade, we could actually say K-2 to 8th grade Lutheran Elementary School as a place where Christian character is built alongside academic excellence. So the genesis for these plans comes as a result of looking at our strategic plan. In the area of discipleship, turn the page over, number 3, to the third core value is community. I won't read the opening paragraph for you, but the action items, the way in which we will carry out our desire to foster Christian friendships for mutual encouragement and support. Number 2, prioritize fellowship space and parking when considering future facility improvements and develop a parking plan for the St. John's campus. You're going to see that. And number 5, maintain contact with alumni and offer opportunities to support and participate in our LES ministry. We'll talk about that at the end as well, as far as how we're going to fund this. Item number 4, area number 4, service. St. John's will also operate an excellent child care and K through to 8th grade Lutheran Elementary School in service to families both in our congregation and in the Wauwatosa community. And so we talk about using our school as a way to reach out to the community. Turn the page over. The 5th core value has to do with evangelism. The highlighted area in the paragraph there, evangelism will be carried out corporately through congregational efforts, our child care, ELC, and our K-3 to 8th grade Lutheran Elementary School. And to do this, we will, number 1, investigate targeted and creative ways to reach the new community of people moving into our immediate ministry area. And number 5, prioritize a welcoming atmosphere for guests and future facility improvements. So the point is simply this, that what we're talking about and what we will be talking about is a way of carrying out what we as a congregation have said that we want to do. Why are we doing this now? The feasibility study, which we concluded a few weeks ago, tells us that the concerns have been, a 28 feasibility study. Let me go back. In 2018, we had a feasibility study, and we were told at that time the congregation is behind going forward in various areas, but there are certain areas that they feel need to be addressed before we do that. And at that time, we said, okay, well, let's address those areas. What were they? Number 1, eliminate the debt, which we did. Last year, Unity Sunday, we burned the mortgage. St. John's is debt-free. We have no debt as a congregation. Increased parking. That was a big item. We talked about that as well. And one of the ways in which we have put ourselves in a position to increase our parking is by buying that property, the Keller property, which is just to the west of the church. That is now a field, and it gives us some options, some opportunities we didn't have before. Number 3, congregation said, right-size the plans. In 2018, the plans we had were expensive, and they were pretty large. I think that the price tag for everything was about $12 million. It could have been done in phases, but when we looked at everything that we wanted to do, it was about a $12 million price tag. Well, we've looked at things, and we have right-sized the plans, cut them down to do exactly only what we feel we need to do, and we've also reduced the cost by about half. We'll be talking about that. And then in 2018, the congregation said, develop a new strategic plan. And we turned our attention to that, and that's what we just looked at, the strategic plan, which we spent some time on just a minute ago. The COVID restrictions, which had a big impact on our church, have dissipated. COVID's always going to be with us, but the restrictions, which had such a negative impact on school and church over the last year and a half, those have dissipated. The current feasibility study, this is what I got ahead of myself, the current feasibility study that we just completed a few weeks ago determined that there was support. There's support by the congregation to go forward. But first, the feasibility studied, again, there were some areas that are in need of further discussion and that need to be addressed and clarified. And that's what we're going to do now. First was the ELC and school expansion and enhancements. That the feasibility study, and some of you participated in that either with an online or with a online interview or a personal interview, that garnered approximately 230 comments. Those comments kind of clustered around 4 different areas. The first was ELC and school expansion and enhancements, some questions about that. There were questions about the parking issues. There were some questions about office expansion, narthex enhancements, sanctuary improvements, kind of put that into the same basket. And there were questions about the timing. Is this the time to do it, and the cost? That's what we're doing right now. That's why we're having this gathering. We're going to talk about all these things, answer any questions that you have, and provide any clarification that we can. Let's talk about St. John's School and the ELC. And Dan, are you willing to run through these slides?
I'll walk.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can do it. Very good.
All right, thanks for the opportunity. Check, test. Okay. All right, so start with the mission statement. And one of the questions that was asked is, should we be doing this at St. John's? And really I want to focus on the 3 P words of our mission statement, which are prepare, proclaim, and provide. In order to do those 3 things, we believe that this building expansion really helps us to do that and do it in an excellent way at St. John's. We talk a little bit about the different programs that we do. One of them is the ELC. And we talk about whether, we ought to have the ELC for so many non-member families and then grow that for non-member families. The key thing to remember is that our mission is to preach the Word. The Holy Spirit does its work. The children hear about Jesus every day. But it's not just that the children hear about Jesus, their families hear about Jesus as well. And there are so many ways that we do that. And I just listed a few of them here, ways that parents get exposure to the gospel message when they enroll their kids at St. John's. And this is done really once their first contact with us is made. They receive communication. They have the opportunity to attend events so that the kids, their parents, their grandparents, extended family, all have an opportunity to hear the gospel, and then the Holy Spirit does His work. Just some pictures of a few of the things that, go run through that, a few of the pictures of things that we do here at St. John's where, again, the gospel is preached not just to the kids, but to their families. This is the bedtime blessings. We got in the classroom that they have their Jesus time. And then on the next page, we've got just more examples of worship services here at church, for Easter, for Christmas, and then mornings with mommy. Just a ton of ways that parents have an opportunity to be exposed to the gospel when their kids attend St. John's. Rachel?
Another question we got asked a lot about is infant care at St. John's and what our plan for infant care might be. Based on the conversations I've had with a lot of people that reach out to me via phone call or on tours, the need for infant care in our community is great. And it's been an area of growth in the last 20 years in the Wells in general. And whether or not we agree about taking care of babies, there is a need for it in our community. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of parents are working full-time, both parents, and so they're looking for a place that's safe for their children to attend. And if they bring their infant to us, then more than likely they'll also have an older child, or they'll stay all the way up through the preschool level. We've had a couple families in the past that have left our facility because they were looking for a place that had infant and preschool-aged care. I think the important thing to remember, too, with infant care is even if we would have the space for it with this expansion project, we probably wouldn't start it immediately when we have the building. It's going to take us a while to get to that point. And I think we want to focus first on growing the programs that we currently have because they are doing so well, and then we would be set up for growth into the infant realm if and when we choose to do that in the future. But if we don't plan for it now, then we will never have that as a possibility. Some just overview on how we staff our ELC right now. Our K2 teachers are hired, and the aides are hired. K3 and K4 teachers are called. Their aides are hired. And we follow licensing requirements for the child-to-teacher ratio. People ask, how are we going to staff if we expand? Obviously, the Lord will provide staff, and we are already talking about how we're going to do that. But when we sit down and think about the cost of staff, we also try to make sure whatever we're bringing in as income is going to be meeting the expenses that we have for all the staff that we have. And we've been able to do that so far. Currently, we have 6 classrooms in the ELC area, and all of them are being used right now. We have 2 K2 rooms, K3, K4, mornings with mommy, and extended care. Some of these rooms are not being used very often right now. They're for some of these wraparound or bonus ministries that we have. But if we would expand into 2 K3s next year and maybe 2 K4s the following year, we will need more space. And a big part of that especially would be, I'll kind of click ahead, to this large motor skill room. We need a lot of space for after school care, for gym usage, for recess time. And then the expansion would also address an additional classroom for this growth. The lecture room may be converted into another K4 room. And then the kindergarten, which currently is on the ELC level, as we call it, would move upstairs to provide room for all these extra bonus rooms.
Thank you. And one of the things that was emphasized in the report from Walsh was the preschool, early learning center. But we can't forget about the benefit that this would have for our elementary school as well. I want to share a couple of ideas or things that would be addressed with this project. Rachel mentioned we might lose the lecture room, which is where our music classes are currently held. So we need to replace that, and this program would do that. We also are in need of a science classroom. The current science where we have our lab is quite small. You feel that with kids, there's really not much to do lab work. So this would add an additional large science room so we could get STEM activities. Another classroom to replace the kindergarten if necessary, which is now lower level. So we might move that up to the middle level. And then that large motor skill area that Rachel talked about is good not just for the preschool, but also the after-school program. One of the things also that we've mentioned before, maybe it didn't come through real well, but all the extras, like if you look at the maps or the drawings over here, everything that's in kind of a peach or a lighter shade is something that would have been touched for remodeling. Well, we've already pulled those things out. We've taken all the remodeling things out. So adding a bathroom between a couple classrooms, adding some windows. What else was there? Adding a crib room for the infant care, putting in another office downstairs. All those things have been removed. They could be redone at any time, but probably not very cost effective for us to do it now with a contractor. We can do those on our own down the road sometime. So I think we'll get back to that when we get to the numbers, but all those things are at this point being removed.
The only thing I would add is, and I think that came through in the first slide, is some of the questions were do we have evidence or do we have data about those who enter our early learning center, our K2 or K3 program? Do we have any data which says that they continue on to St. John's? And I would say we do have some data. There's a fairly significant percentage which go on. But I would caution us of equating the ELC or equating the idea of it being an outreach tool with being a membership tool. It may or may not lead to membership at St. John's, if that would be a great side benefit, but the real opportunity is to proclaim Jesus Christ to these little children and through them to their parents and their grandparents, and then we let the Lord do the rest. We're in the process business, not the results business, and this gives us the opportunity. We're going to just kind of go through these 4 areas. This would be the first of those 4 areas that questions were raised. What questions would you have, or what further information could we provide regarding the whole area and the expansion of our ELC program? Anything come to mind? Any questions? further clarification? Okay, well, if there is, you can ask them at any time. Let's move on to the parking issues. Do the proposed plans adequately address our parking issues, especially the need for handicap parking? That was, those were some concerns which were raised. And the answer is not really. So we have a potential solution, and that would be to remove the parsonage. The easiest, the simplest way to get more parking close to St. John's, the simplest way would be to remove the parsonage. And that, if that were the case, the parsonage right now rests right here. If we were to remove the parsonage, then we would have this additional, this space, which could be used for parking. We could probably strengthen or lengthen the drive-through, and we'll talk about that too. And this is that covered porch as far as a drop-off area. So the simplest solution, now whether it is what we want to do or not, that will be further discussion, but the simplest solution would be this. Now this is the Keller property. We will make parking there as well, but we would lose some parking if we go with this proposed addition with the office area. So, but that is one of the things that we're looking at, talking about, thinking about. The possible new parsonage, on one of the two green lots up the hill, you know, we have those two lots up on Dewey Avenue. If we wanted to remain in the parsonage business, those lots are zoned residential, so a house could be built on one or both of them. It's possible that St. John's would like to get out of the housing business altogether. And simply provide their pastors with a housing allowance. Right now, we've got we got 4 pastors here at St. John's, 1 parsonage, and so we're already doing that with the 3 other pastors. An estimate would be about $60,000 to remove the parsonage, to raise it, and to prepare the lot to make it where it could be used for a parking lot. Again, we're just looking at round some numbers. How much does it cost to build a house? This is a figure. It could be less than that. $100,000 to construct a new parsonage up the hill, if that were the way in which we wanted to go. We'll talk about that in just a little bit more. This plan would increase our parking stalls from 32 currently to 58. Now, it must be said too that over here, back when we get to the school, we would be losing about eight spots. So there would be a loss of 8 over there. There would be a gain of what we got there, 626 here. So we're talking about approximately an additional 20 spots of parking. Question had come up on Sunday: is it feasible? Is it possible to put some kind of a parking ramp or so? A parking spot itself costs about $2,000. A parking ramp spot costs about $20,000. You know, with the going up and the cement and so forth. So here again, simplest solution, whether it's the one we choose to go with, simplest solution is to move the parsonage. We would be adding in a significant number of handicap parking stalls. You know, that was a question which came up. You know, we'd have some parking stalls. The handicap parking would be closest to the entry to the church here. There would probably be some on this side too. And we would be able to create a 2-way driveway with an additional drop-off lane. This is what we're talking about. This is that drop-off lane, and we should say that there was strong support for a covered canopy. So that idea of a covered canopy right here, and you see that on the pictures. Another advantage is that all parking would be on the same grade, no steps or slopes. Right now, we've got some steps and there's some slopes and so forth. And this would be able to even everything out. Mike?
Those increased stalls, is that the assumption that the parsonage comes down and those become spaces?
Yes.
So if we don't do that, we're adding a few spaces, but not a lot.
Correct. If we don't do that, we're adding, well, it's almost a wash, I think. It's about a wash from what we've got, from what we have now. What we would do is we would have some increased parking on this, on this side. We lose 8 on that side, we probably gain, we'd gain 8 on this side, but it would essentially be a wash. Any other questions regarding parking?
How are you saying you're losing 8 spots by school?
What's that?
Losing only 8 spots by school.
What would we be losing?
A lot more than 8. Right, you're going to that whole back area, so you're saying just the ones where.
No, right here. Right,
Okay.
that's, I think that's what we're talking about, right? These are the ones that, are against that area. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Come out of the middle.
Yeah, because you're gonna have to drive instead of turn around back there.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. But that would have, the turnaround would have no impact on, this would have no impact on the turnaround.
The biggest impact is on the kids, right? Where are the kids gonna play?
Where are the kids gonna play? This cutout, yeah, this cutout spot. At one time, just if you remember, at one time we had talked about, wouldn't it be neat if we could swap with Aurora, give them those 2 lots, and then we get their bottom parking lot? They're not interested in that. There's no interest in that. There's been a change in leadership there too, and even to have a conversation is way down the list. So it is with the idea that we need to do with what we have to make the changes that we want to make. So, any other questions regarding the parking? Mark?
Not really parking, but whatever we're doing, you're still not changing. Does it get congested still in the morning when you want to drop your kids off and pick them up? That was always a problem.
I would say it's not in the morning. After school, it can be for about 5 minutes, it can be tight. But the biggest problem is getting out.
Yeah,
You
that's
get
part of
stuck on duty because you can't, the light turns red, that's the biggest problem. But actually, it works fairly well, like it's a 5-minute backup.
Other questions or thoughts regarding the whole parking issue? Yes, Jeff?
Without getting into any numbers or anything, the cost of maintaining the parsonage versus the, well, I forgot the term, the
Housing allowance?
the housing allowance.
Cost of maintaining the parsonage as opposed to a housing allowance. My guess is it probably is less, would be my guess. Well, I don't know what the cost of maintaining it, on a yearly basis would be. So I really can't answer that question.
I would comfortably say that it's a lot more, it's a lot cheaper to maintain it than it is to do a housing allowance, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. Maintaining, once it's, maintaining it, making the improvements and so forth, the periodic improvements is probably less than if we were to offer a housing allowance. And I couldn't even tell you, I mean, I get a housing allowance, but I couldn't even tell you what it is.
There's so much more to it than just that. I mean, the benefit of having Eric right next to school, having somebody on site, being able to offer a parsonage that close to a new young pastor, if it was with Kyle, then it was with Eric. Even if money had to be raised to fix up that parsonage,
That's the whole, that's the discussion. That's the discussion. The discussion is certainly the advantages to having, on-site parsonage, or, going up the hill and so forth, to having a presence in the area. Peter, did you have a comment?
The only comment was that the other side of that discussion is the advantage to Pastor and Bethany buying their own home possibly and living it. If they're building their own personal equity, just like a lot of us that own homes, and that it's better for them in the future than living in our parsonage.
But how many pastors could not take the position? The parsonage was such a huge draw, would be my other side. Yeah, I agree with you.
Absolutely, and it was for Pastor.
Sure.
But in the long run, in his life and yours and mine, it's better to own your own home and build up your equity.
Chet?
This is an issue that we want to take a closer look at, because it is something that's come up fairly recently. So we want to take a look at the whole concept of, do we want to stay in the, owning it, all of those things. However, if you go to Synod and see what their recommendation is, they encourage not a parsonage, and that a called worker be able to purchase or
rent or whatever.
have a property that they can then gain some equity with. Because that does put them in a hole these days if they do go somewhere else or over the years. So currently, that's what Synod says, prefers.
Would also say that every situation would be different. It would be incumbent upon the congregation, when they call someone, depending upon their situation, to work with them as far as if there would be some potential assistance needed and so forth. Some of the pastors, like some of the pastors that we have called, they own their own homes now. I think that there was one who was in, one of the ones we called was in a parsonage. And that, those questions come up. I would say, without a one-size-fits-all answer, it's incumbent upon the congregation to provide assistance in one way or another for someone who they are asking to serve them. Dan?
I was going to say, the good thing is, we really have the option to either give the housing allowance and not use our residential lots on Dewey, or have a parsonage that's virtually one house away. We don't have the middle house yet. We would like to get that, probably someday will. But at any rate, we can solve our parking issues, which are really a critical thing for a lot of people, and then either retain the parsonage or make the decision that we're not going to do that. And that, like you said, Jeff, we need some study on that, no question, and see what direction we'd like to go.
Right.
But again, yes,
Daniel?
I was just gonna ask, how old is our current parsonage?
that parsonage was built, I am going to say, well, you would know, 62?
Yeah, my father was on the building committee, and that was about 62. It is in need of some repairs. Dan, I think you'd agree with that?
Yes, Pastor Schrader has given us a list. We haven't done anything, but there's quite a lot that needs to be done.
Then give me the list.
Yeah, we have the list, and it's probably in the $40,000-$50,000 range on the conservative side. We're looking at all the windows have never been replaced. There's just a whole bunch of things. The utility areas, the kitchen, the restrooms, it's this 1962 house, basically. And so, yeah, there's some things that if we were to retain it on that site, things we should do.
Yeah, the point is that the questions are, do we want to be in the parsonage business? And the simplest answer to parking, the simplest answer to additional parking next to the church would be using that property for that purpose. So again, no decisions have been made. But as we look at our different options.
One quick question.
Yep.
So is that a full retaining wall going on the outside of that would be going to the south, that would be a retaining wall, correct?
Right.
Yeah, significant, 10 foot tall, whatever it is, same as it is now, continuing all the way down,
Yeah.
probably?
Exactly.
That-
Yeah, if you look at the back lot, where
Same
that
way,
lot is,
continue that.
it would go down because of, even though, and there also would start at the driveway from
Sure.
nothing, and then it would build up. Yeah, right there as you go south. It wouldn't be, it would come down a little bit as it goes towards Dewey, but there would be a substantial retaining wall like you see back there now.
Is that in the price that you
Yes.
guys have for raising the
Yeah,
bar?
that's part of it. The idea is to get the parking on grade.
Of course.
You know, there was another plan we looked at where we would leave that raised way up and then have another entrance and then some steps coming down, and we, you know,
That doesn't
really in the
help.
long run, it's
Yeah.
better to do it all on grade.
For sure.
So, Jeff,
One of the other things that this does is locates handicap parking very close to where the entrance would be. And that we also considered a critical thing.
For sure.
Because right now, you've got handicap parking basically in the back, and you have to go up that slope, there's no sidewalks and anything like that.
Very icy.
And you're going to a smaller door, this would be a larger entrance as well, so all of those things are kind of in play.
For sure.
That's certainly some of the comments we heard was more handicap parking, more accessible parking. So that's something we wanted to consider as well.
and again, just right here, that portico, that covered porch, got a lot of support. Got a, you know, as far as a drop-off point and an entryway. Anything else on parking? Any other questions? So, let's talk about the office, the narthex, the sanctuary, and the proposed plans there. Why questions come up about that? If you saw the pictures, and I know you all did, why an outdoor deck? Will it serve its purpose? Will it be underutilized? Will it be just the reincarnation of the gazebo that we had, which was not, which was underutilized? I think that the main thing here, and more important consideration, is that we would be looking at this providing an alternate church entrance from the back of the church lot. So the idea here is not so much that, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have an outdoor deck here? You can take that off. The real consideration is, if we have got now this parking here where the Keller property is, would it be advantageous to have a more direct entry into the church? So then you could have an entry here, an entry over here under the portico, and then obviously an entryway on Dewey Avenue. So it would provide that. And then as far as a gathering space, a fellowship space, it would be similar to what our stone porch in the front of the church is, as far as fellowship, gathering, and so forth during those warm weather times when it would be used, when it would be, functional. But I think the biggest thing is the idea of where those windows are right now, where right now this is the turkey pen, right? This is where the turkeys, if you've seen the turkeys, this is where they hang out, and you can see them through these windows. There would be the idea of having a door there, which would then bring that in. Mike?
I didn't quite understand the door that would be there. I pictured this as the door that would open and all the cold air and the snow would fly in. Is it a more substantial door than what I just said?
Well, I think what you just said is what we would try to avoid. We would simply say, yeah, it has to be a workable, it has to be a workable door and situation. Yep, Jeff.
By adding these extra entrances or whatever, does the doors on hardwood that are barely used, is there a plan to do some of that then, like maybe close those off, or?
Those doors on hardwood? Yeah. Those doors on, Dan, to that point?
What we've had the thought on that is to put a better sidewalk from the Keller lot, let's call it the Keller parking lot, which is what this is addressing too, that would go from there to that double door entrance on Harwood, and you could come in that way too. There is a narrow sidewalk there now, and it has some steps on it. That would need to be replaced with a level sidewalk, but that would also then be able to utilize that entrance from Harwood that virtually isn't used right now.
Mike?
Just another comment is, I like the idea of that door there because it's another exit thing, you know. If we had to evacuate very quickly, there's, you know, I think another door and another way out to evacuate is a good idea. I'm just speaking in favor of that because of that.
Right. Okay, thank you. So again, the focus is more on another entry in and out as opposed to, you know, a porch, which may or may not be, a good idea. But you can see the sidewalk here. You can see the sidewalk here. This is right about here is where the existing building ends. So we're looking at, you know, coming out this way, and you can see it on the renderings as well. Any other questions regarding that? Because some questions came up about that. Do these plans address the restroom issues? And the answer is yes. In fact, if you look at these plans, even these have been improved upon. I think these have got like 3 stalls, and I think the newest renderings have 5 or 6, right? 5 or 6 stalls. So we've got, and not only that, they're more easily accessible, and they are, of course, ADA, you know, compliant, which has to be, obviously, but we would want it to be. So that the idea of restrooms, enhanced restrooms or modernized restrooms, got a lot of support. Are the improvements to our worship space necessary? The two big improvements that had been suggested in what our consultant had written up for his case study was the idea of padded pews and new carpeting. And the question is maybe, maybe not. I mean, there's still a lot of, that is not an integral part of what we would be doing, but a capital campaign will show us our level of support and allow us to adjust plans accordingly moving forward. The point is that what we have put down is in this whole package, although we've scaled it back a little bit, all that, there can be adjustments depending upon what we find, what our people are willing to support. You know, and that brings us to the 4th issue. Anything else on the office area? I should also mention that what's not mentioned is that with the additional office area, and that would be, again, we'd be looking at, you know, this area right here. We're looking at some additional offices. We're looking at a new entryway with a receptionist area, offices that would allow for our financial administrator to have her own spot, as well as offices for the, you know, for the pastors and workroom. And along with that, if we would also be building under the current St. Matthew's room, that would be extended. Correct, Dan?
No, actually, the St. Matthew's room would be reduced in size to run a hallway through there. And so there'd be St. Matt's room would be a room for about 25 people, maybe for the big class on Sundays. And then beyond that would be a much larger room with a seating of about 50. And that would replace, if we lose the lecture hall over at school, which we've often used for Bible classes, then that larger Bible classroom would be used for that purpose. And have a seating, whereas this one has seating for about 90 to 100, that one about 50, and then the smallest one about 25. So we'd have really 3 rooms down here that are usable.
Yeah. I guess that's what I meant, and I just didn't articulate it well. It's just that there would be a room beyond the St. Matthew's room. Any questions or comments or thoughts regarding that? Then let's talk about the timing and cost. How much will this cost? Well, the figures that we have from MSI say the church, office, narthex renovations, so the things on this side of the street come in at about 2.1.
That's without the parking lot?
With or without the parking lot, Dan?
The parking and paving is included in the estimates.
That's
Yeah.
not the raising of the home, correct?
Correct. And not the building of the parsonage.
Yep.
School and ELC renovations, suggested figure was 3.8. There are some essential deferred maintenance items, about 100,000, which would be rolled into and would be taken care of by the contractor. So the total estimated contractor cost would be approximately $6 million. Dan?
Just wanted to throw a caveat in here that these are the estimated costs based on experience of our MSI, who's been our consultant and architect along the way here. Of course, none of this has been bid, and you know, with inflation at 8-point-something%, whatever it is, they tried to, even in these estimates, include an inflation factor, but just wanted to be full disclosure, these are not bid prices. These are cost estimates based on past experience and including an inflation factor. We won't know the exact costs until we would actually let the project out to bid.
Factored in increased interest rates on loans that we have to take out.
Right, Larry would probably be the best answer on that one, but I know they've looked into what our situation is for borrowing. Maybe you're going to get to that yet.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that, yeah. Can this be done in phases, the question has been asked. You know, could you do this first? And the answer would be, yeah, but with the understanding that if we do one this year and then 2 years we do another one, there would certainly obviously be increased costs. The capital campaign, which is all that we're looking at right now, you know, we're not committing ourselves. What we may be committing ourselves to doing is see how much support we have. That will determine what our level of support is and what we may or may not be able to do. And then, what about the deferred maintenance items? Did you have a question? You want to wait? Can you? Yeah. Let me just run. The deferred maintenance items. There are some deferred maintenance items here which got to be done regardless of what happens. You know, and I think we're looking at about 150,000 of immediate deferred maintenance items, which we could bid out ourselves, but they got to be done, and regardless of what we do with this. And some of that's wrapped into that $6 million cost, you know, that 100,000, but some will be contracted out separately as well. But I think we can probably figure that from what we know, we probably have close to $200,000 to $250,000 worth of deferred maintenance things. Okay, so those are the figures I just mentioned. What's a reasonable fundraising goal? Well, this is why we hired a consultant to do his interviews, to crunch, you know, based on their past experience with a congregation our size, what they heard from our people, etc. The feasibility study estimate, our consultant estimated that among our people, we could potentially raise anywhere from $2.5 to $3.5 million. Now that's what our fundraiser has said, you know, and they've got these formulas and so forth. And so we asked, what's that based on? It's based on satisfaction with St. John's and project acceptance. One of the things the feasibility study said is that there's a high degree of acceptance for how things are going here at St. John's, and the idea that what we're looking at doing is not extravagant or exorbitant. It is something which would help us advance our gospel ministry, which is what we're always looking to do. The opinion of church members on the level of fundraising, and again, how valuable is that? I don't know, but when we asked a lot of people, what do you think this congregation has the ability, this is around the range that they would come in. The prospects for pace-setting gifts, the prospects for gifts from people who would like to see this happen and who may be blessed with wealth, and top gift survey respondents were willing to consider. One of the things that the consultant asked is, would you be willing to support a project like this? And if you were, could you kind of give us an estimate for what you think your range would be? And again, without locking anybody into anything, that's part of what they do. And our current giving levels, what they will often say is that over a 3-year period, you may be able to, it's kind of the rule of thumb, with a motivated congregation, over 3 years, you could get what your 3 times your annual, what your annual giving is over a 3-year period. Our general fund offering is at about 1.2 million from our people. And so the idea would be, if you take that times 3 over, double that again, this is how they came up with that figure. What's a reasonable amount to borrow? Let's say that we were able to raise $3 million for a $6 million project. And we said to ourselves, you know what, just as we did when we built the school 20 years ago, we need to complete the project. Let's borrow the rest and pay that off, in the next number of years. A conservative figure, we just switched banks, a bank which we're now with Wauwatosa State Bank, and they are very, very favorable toward churches, especially churches in the Wells. A 50% of the project cost is be a conservative figure. If you remember, for those of us who were around here 20 years ago, we raised for our school, with the Rooted and Growing, we raised among ourselves about 1.8 at that time. And the entire project cost was, I think, 4.2. And so therefore we did, we borrowed the rest. And it took us a little longer than we had expected or projected, but we paid it off. And that at that time was considerably higher than a 50% project cost. And ambitious would be 60% of project cost, simply saying that these things are workable, they're doable, in the finance world. What kind of response can we expect from the city of Wauwatosa, as far as wanting to do this? The initial conversations we've had with Wauwatosa people have been favorable. Would you say that is true, Jeff? Jeff is the one who's had conversations. Favorable responses. We're improving the quality of life in Wauwatosa. And there's who could argue with that? And the parsonage lot is zoned commercial. So as far as making that a parking lot should not be, one wouldn't think would be much of a problem. And some city personnel has changed since 2018. And in 2018, there were probably some who were less favorable than they are today as far as what we might want to do. What's next? Any questions on this? Yeah, Mark.
Since I think Rooted and Growing as we go forward, do we have a lot more competition now from Wauwatosa for early learning, for preschool, for kindergarten, even the outlying areas? Because wasn't it in the past there was fewer opportunities for kids to have that? But now I think a lot of public school programs have, I don't have early learning, but they have preschool and kindergarten.
I'll let Rachel and Dan address that. I'll just say what I think I know, and then you can either correct me or expand on that. I think that is that is true, and I think that however it appears that if you compare what their program is to what we offer, it's going to be vastly different. Number one, so the value. And I think when parents when parents make the comparison of value and what they get, I think that is one thing. Plus, we're looking at, we just had this discussion last night about expanding our, an additional K-3 program because we got a waiting list, right? So, any thoughts, additional thoughts on that, Dan?
Exactly what you said. I mean, if you want an excellent program, you'll come to St. John's, period. The public school program may be free, but it's a fraction of the time that our kids spend, and the quality just doesn't compare. Second thing is, we're looking at school choice, and that would allow families that qualify to attend K-4 for free, for example. So there's that option, there's that possibility. The second thing you mentioned is also true, that waiting list that we've got, both for K2 and K3, is significant. We could open a third K2 classroom, we could open a second K3 classroom and fill them both right now.
Right now, we have 2 K2 classrooms and a wait list of 24 for K2. And K3 has 18 enrolled, and we have a wait list. I just added 3 more today for K3, so we have 35 wait lists at this point.
Yeah, so in spite of the competition, I think the word is out that St. John's is the place to be, number one, but also the other places are full too. People can't find a place for their kids. So for them to come to us and say, we want us to instruct your kids, we get that opportunity without much work on our part to share the gospel with the kids and with their parents.
That certainly is good news. I wasn't
Yeah,
aware of that. I thought that.
It's unbelievable. K2 and K3 are just,
I think because we are competing with public school for K4 specifically, we don't see as large of a wait list for K4, which is why we're talking about the option of going school choice. But K2 and K3 right now is where it's really booming for sure.
I think too. But and this is just an editorial comment. But with the direction that the public school is going with their social programs and what they believe they need to teach and so forth, one would think that there is going to be eventually a movement toward, well, I think there already is, toward private schools. And even I think among those who may not consider themselves to be particularly, religious or whatever, what they know is that they don't want their kids to have this. And so they would be looking, and this would put us in a position to be prepared, to be prepared for that. One could also argue, if ever there was a time where we needed solid Christian education for our children, that time is now. And even within this community, which I just speak as one who's been here close to 25 years, has really shifted from a fairly conservative community to what's become a very liberal community. But those people who want what we have, they're still out there, and we are able to, and we will be able to provide what they need.
No comparison. I mean, I think a lot of us here take what is happening at the school for granted. I mean, I don't know how many of you have been in other programs, have seen other programs. Me just being around in the summer, and I tell Rachel this every day, there is no comparison. Anyone that wants to tell other people about this, like I say, the wells probably, we don't see it. But there's no comparison to this program that they're running compared to the public program. So even if we just showed more people and she kept showing people, the people will keep coming, especially with that.
I think that many years ago, when we built our new school, we talked about this in ad nauseum. An educational program has to be dedicated to excellence in program, personnel, and facility. And when we do that, we're going to be fine. And I think we do that, and we have done that. Can't have 2 out of 3. You got to have 3 out of 3, and that's why we work as hard as we do. I talk to people who have been in the public school system, public school system, and they make comparison to what they see, the dedication level within our teachers and so forth, and they'll tell you, again, there's just no comparison. Yes?
Another question, I know this was, I don't know how this happened in the past, but you certainly have a lot of children who come who are members not of St. John's, maybe they're Grace downtown or someplace in West South, so they go to another church that doesn't have a school. And that's not bad, we're attracting those in, but are we taking full advantage of that in a good way? Because when my kids were there, that's what we saw as well. We saw a lot of Grace kids.
No, there are. I think, I think for many years, and I think to some degree it's still true, go ahead. We are the school of, the school of choice for those who are at Grace. We have a fairly significant number of Grace members.
Maybe what it is that St. John's becomes more of a school, not just for St. John's, but for a larger community. So is the larger community supporting this?
Yeah. Paul?
One question, a couple of slides back, you don't gotta go back up. When you were talking about doing them separately, right? If that is an option.
Oh, yeah, can this be done in phases?
Okay. So in the perfect world, you guys see this all happening at once? Both sides of the road torn apart under construction?
Dan, can you answer, in a perfect world, there would be a way to sequence it. There would be a way to sequence it which would yeah, I mean, there's going to be some pain involved.
I don't care about the pain. My question is, but you guys think all of it going at once is a better option?
Ideally, the school portion would be started in spring, because we'd like to get that done by the fall start of school. That would have priority. As far as the church portion, the thought is we would have to cordon off the current narthex, and we would need to use the entrance on Harwood, because the church facility itself could certainly be used right through construction while we're remodeling narthex, adding on this side, but that would probably be taking place more in the fall through the winter, because we don't want to interrupt the school schedule. So there would be some sequencing, but there are some real cost savings by when they have everything here, and we're doing this, we have this contractor here, okay, we're doing this. There's some definite cost savings to do both at the same time, to a certain extent. The school would have to take priority first to get it done if possible by the time it starts school, or the majority of it for sure.
At least a rough grade, a rough number. Yeah, okay.
Sue?
On that same note, if that's all disrupted and we can't, at one meeting it was said that you can't use then the front door or the side door to get into church, so all those steps would have to be used for the entrances for church. Is that right?
I'm,
How will that work with the elderly who has trouble now?
You would still have the ramp in front of you.
all I would say is that we would have to make it possible for our people to get to
Absolutely.
church, and we'd find a way.
Yeah, because at one point they said current narthex would be totally off. I mean, oh, you couldn't access through there, so maybe that's changed. So that would be great.
And if it really got to, do you remember, I can't give you the date, I'm gonna say, well, I'll try. I think it's probably about 2004. Do you remember when we did spend a lot of time refurbishing the church and we spent a summer worshiping in the gym? You know, that's a possibility too, if necessary, if this really would all be torn up and, you know, incapacitated for anyone to get there.
We still had the elevator though, to get down at that time.
You still had? In
In the date that you're mentioning, in 2004. The elevator was
yeah.
there, that you could still use.
Sure, oh yeah. Exactly, right. But I'm thinking, I'm saying, I think, boy, I'm trying to remember, I think we had Saturday night services here. Did we have Saturday night services here down in the fellowship hall? Yeah, I think we did Saturday. And that's what and so there was the elevator was, you could do that. And then it was Sunday.
You had the front stairwell entrance.
All right.
Everybody had to walk the steps.
Okay, memory, is failing here, but I do know this. That it would be imperative, incumbent upon us to find a way, to make a way so that our people can get to church and get into,
And originally, even coming in the back entrance, you had a stairwell to come up.
originally,
Originally,
right.
part of the stairway came up, part came down to the basement.
And,
Because the driveway was right next to the church. And then you had the school, and then the teachers.
oh,
next to
all right,
the school.
okay. We're getting a lesson in history here, right, Ed? Yeah, okay. So, other thoughts or questions or comments on timing and cost? What's next? That's today. We're talking right now, in addition to our open forum, which we had last Sunday. And that's exactly what we're doing, additional open forum to address additional questions asked today or new questions. Next Tuesday is September 27th. The Church Council, based on the recommendation of our consultant with the feasibility study and based on the conversations and the feedback which we're receiving during these open forums, will make a recommendation to the congregation. And that recommendation will be presented to the congregation in a special voters meeting on October 2nd, following the second service. And the recommendation would be to go forward, not commit to a building plan, but commit to, the next step would be, we would like to enter into a capital campaign, an appeal, to see what level of support we have, and then so that we could not make a thoughtful, knowledgeable decision on where we go. Paul?
Silly question because I don't know numbers, but if you, let's just say you plan on, you think you can raise 3 million, right?
Right.
Let's just say some economy crashes, whatever, and we only come up with $1 million. Does everything get re-looked at, or what happens in scenarios like that?
Then we're back here talking to you guys, saying,
What do
we've got
do
$1
now?
million, you know, we may have a recommendation saying, this is what we think we should do. But until we find out what, you know, if the feasibility study holds, and we find out after going through that process of fundraising, exactly where we're at. It's at that point then that we, as a congregation, decide where do we go from here.
Yeah, and that's when it goes, okay, we're gonna do this, then we put it out for bid, and that's the next step.
It's a step-by-step process, and we're not committing to anything tonight, or anything other than on October 2nd, potentially, that we would go ahead with a fundraising campaign. But we'll see what the recommendation is, but that's the next step.
Got it.
And certainly, to be able to talk about that, we have to talk about, well, what are the needs? And that's where all this comes from, so.
Other thoughts or questions or comments? Mention that. 20 years ago, 23, again, when we built the school, this is a passage from God's Word which we often looked at and took comfort in and found strength in. This is the Apostle Paul writing to the Ephesians. It's at the end of where he's talking about God's grace, and he talks about how now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. And the point simply being is that we can talk all we want. Ultimately, we are going to be relying on God working through his people for what we want to do next and what it's going to look like. And those are pretty good hands to be in. Final questions, final thoughts. Yes, Sue?
For the school expansion, and then they were talking about the infant care in the
Correct.
future. are the expansions we want to make now sufficient with enough extra room that when that comes about, we can shift things around and fit that in, or will we be too small too soon and back?
Did you hear that? Did you hear the question?
The plans that we've come up with are already factoring in room for an infant toddler room, in addition to the other expansion we want to do for K2, K3, and K4.
Great.
Other questions or thoughts? Okay, well, thank you much for being here. Let's close with the blessing. Nobody has to leave. You can, if more questions come up, you know, we got people around here. So, Lord, bless us and keep us. Lord, make your face shine upon us and be gracious to us. Lord, look with favor upon us and give us peace. Amen.